The Enhancement Shaman Wrath gameplay certainly has evolved since the early Warmane or Sunwell days. The totem-roided chads used to look big, strong and lean in the Wraith Strike days, and are now finding themselves as crippling weak, maulding hairlines, and if googling TRT could possibly help them to out-DPS their neurodivergent guildies. So, we're gonna go over some of my lessons from playing Wrath Enhancement Shaman, from Wrath pre-patch up until our Nostradamus Doomsday Tier 10 release. This video contains footage of my guild's PTR experience, so I'm just gonna let it roll in the background, throw some pictures up for you, and let's get into it. Enhancement Shaman mains have a bad habit of over-romanticizing earlier tiers relative to the tiers to come. Enhancement has never been the Chad of Wrath. We were never stackable, but our number one competitors just hadn't hit puberty yet, so we were always gonna be able to bully them into getting ourselves a raid spot. Because let's not forget, the main reasons we are in a raid comp are 1. 10% attack power, 2. 20% attack speed, cringe, 3. Enhancing totems. In tier 10, all of these Enhancement Shaman trademark raid-wide buffs can be checkmarked by marksmanship hunters, blood DKs and resto shamans, which are having an insane high school glow up by the time we are getting to the geriatric state of enhancement. So, is it time to put Enhancement Shaman to its final rest? Not exactly. Simply put, if you are able to pull your own weight damage-wise as an enhancement, you still provide meaningful raid buffs that free up many raid spots for class stacking whatever might end up being coming the meta. So, in this guide, I will explain what I do, and more specifically, what I do on the Lich King 25-man heroic encounter. Hopefully it will help some of you out. As Enhance, we are going to be taking a lot of risks, for virtually little to no gain, compared to the mindless, glove-wielding mages or ferals that can experience the cardinal symptoms of having a stroke and they will still out-DPS you. I'm thinking, let's start with the trend-coughing White Walker Lord himself, the Lich King. I start the fight with pre-placing 2 pieces tier 4 strength totem, and I try to proc as much spell power as I possibly can to open up with the big fire ele big boy. Once the boss gets dragged out of my tier 4 power totems, it's time to replace them. I experimented a lot with fire totem usage in phase 1. Half of the pulls I just let my big fire elemental stay up, but some pulls he would randomly start hitting non-priority targets, and I wouldn't be able to fire Nova Lich King once the boss got dragged out. My damage done to Lich King actually went up once I started replacing Magma Totem and be able to fire Nova instead of having my big boy fire ele even when hitting the boss. These findings had log support, as my damage done to Lich King with Fire Nova and Magma Totem as a source outweighed the damage done by my fire elemental. If you wish to experiment with this yourself and you can't believe what I'm spouting, I suggest you test a filter as follows. It's on the screen. It can often be very tempting to keep yourself 100% uptime on the boss even when it's being dragged out of melee shadow traps. I know that some of us like to go to Bouncy Castle and just fly around everywhere on that frozen throne, but if you have to choose between hitting the boss at 100% of the time and risking getting hit by a shadow trap, or lose a little bit of uptime but don't look like a total fucking clown, I would just not hit the boss. Watching on your screen now is a couple of screenshots of damage done to Lich King between 100% and 70% from some of the successful pulls we had during the PTR. And as you can see, it varies slightly where you end up being relative to other classes. But you should never expect to be number 1, but you also should never expect to be at the very bottom of the meters, right? Point for discussion is weaving as Enhancement Shaman in tier 10. I found myself being annoyed with accidentally refreshing my Maelstrom 5th stack, so it technically would be a 6th or a 7th stack, before I managed to get off the global cooldown and send my Lightning Bolt or Healing Wave. With the amount of haste we have in tier 9 and tier 10 BIS, you will definitely find yourself over-capping Maelstroms if you go into logs and look at refreshes. If you play around 5 stacks before you send a Lightning Bolt, this is definitely happening to you. These Maelstrom stacks, number 6, 7, could instead have been a stack 1 or 2 of a new set of Maelstroms. So, should we start weaving again to prevent this phenomena? So sorry for having to interrupt myself like this, but there's one thing I'd like to advise melee players to do. When Lich King transitions, he will run towards the center of the map shortest way possible from his position upon triggering the next phase. You should rocket boots here and try to hit them as he's running. The extra damage you do here is just free, valuable damage. Sadly, on this attempt that you have rolling in the background, my tank had to run to not die, so I couldn't get much uptime on this phase, but I've included another clip just to showcase what I want you guys to do. Okay, thank you, but now back to weaving. Should I? In short, yes, you should. But I also believe that focusing too much on weaving will hurt your overall GCD usage and positioning in intense fights. Weaving was hard on Patchwork in tier 7, weaving is almost humanly impossible in tier 10 with the haste we have and the difficulty of the fights movement wise. My solution became to simply send a lightning bolt or chain lightning consistently at 4 stacks instead at 5. I will clip my autos, but I will not overcap my maelstroms. I will still have virtually zero downtime between globals. There is a worst case scenario, and that is when you start to Neanderthal weave at 4, but an auto attack sneaks itself in there, and actually you put yourself at 5, but you were hardcasting at 4. There's also the dream scenario, where you were mentally prepared to hardcast a lightning bolt at 4, but your swing timer just landed and you went to 5, and it became an instant cast. So sometimes this could actually be a blessing. So obviously, tracking your swing timer is the best, but across many casts, across many raids, across many resets, I personally will not be able to process swing timer information fast enough to make a correct decision. So if you want to do what I do, start hardcasting at 4. Going into phase 2 of the Lich King encounter, you'll be delighted as an enhancement shaman to find out we're incredibly good at killing Valkyrs while simultaneously damaging the Lich King or Raging Spirits. We sadly don't have a Valkyr grip escape, but hey, it's 1 out of 25. Surely it won't happen to us, right? Not this pull. I flashed a filter above the screen to show damage done to Lich King between 70 and 40% health, which is the relevant health range for this phase. I just noticed that Warcraft logs have added Valkyr damage done to only count if the Valkyr is above 50% health, but we didn't have that by default on the PTR, so I added a filter to it as well. Lastly, this filter also contains damage done to Raging Spirits, as many guilds will struggle to kill off the Ragings during the transitions. Damage done to these semi-priority targets is still interesting when you're trying to figure out what characters and what players you should bring to your guild. When it comes to just raw Raging Spirit damage during the transitions and phase 2, Enhancement Shaman is extremely powerful. Sadly, I don't think that Raging Spirit is going to be the main reason why your guild isn't capable of progressing this fight, but it's nice to see your name at least in the top 3 every now and then. This sadly becomes looking way worse for you when you start adding the other transitions and the other Raging Spirits, where other classes will definitely catch up to you. But hey, at least during phase 2, your raging damage is sick, dude. Now, you could stay in the grid every single defile and look really good on the meters or the pars, could you lose no uptime. Up until you cause a raid wipe, because you just dropped a defile so bad your ancestors cringe in their urns. Just play safe. Run out 1 to 2 seconds before the file drops. If it's somebody else, start running back in. If everybody does this, your guild will get much more consistently through this phase. Don't get lulled into thinking, I can just stay in, this won't happen to me. Or look at the damage meter, where you have one melee player or a Death Knight playing extremely greedy and out DPSing everyone, and then have your leadership tell their raiders to play like him because look at how much he's pumping, when in reality he's just getting away with playing greedy, but if mechanics would have happened to him, you guys wouldn't get that far. Getting grabbed as an enhancement shaman is terrible, for you and your guild, as you can't break free and they lose a big pumper on the Valkyrs. You sit tight, pray they'll break you out fast and you can get right back to where you were. When progressing Lich King phase 2 as an enhancement shaman, just get comfortable with the timings of the file, versus stacking up and you'll do great. Your cleave rotation is really simple and nothing feels as good as sending a Chain Lightning or a Fire Nova into 4 priority targets at the same time. This phase is probably peak content as Enhancement Shaman in terms of fun, unless you get grabbed. This sequence right here is an excellent example of melee movement as an Enhancement Shaman or any melee DPS. Try to mimic this with your own guild. That you just added the file into a Valkyr grab overlap. So it's important to be pre-spread for a nice defile and then get right back into the Valkyr stacking position. Right here, the Valkyrs come back, everybody's stacked, and we can go to town as just press Fire Nova, bro. One recurring question in my stream and in my community is if we should play physical setup or spell hands in tier 10. Well, the question was relevant already back in tier 8, where the golden Serenite Dragon from Flame Leviathan was really promising. Discussions back then speculated that having a spell power main hand for fire elemental proc into weapon swapping into a physical could become the meta, especially for single target DPS. Sadly, this theory crafting never came into fruition, neither for parsing, overall damage, or for speedrunning. Spell hands or spell-inspired gameplay just came out on top. In tier 10, the discussions has risen once again, but instead of talking about Mjolnir, we are now talking about trinkets such as Whispering Fanged Skull or Deathbringer's Will. My stance is this: spell-based enhancement gameplay has consistently outperformed physical playstyle in every tier so far. Getting crit capped in tier 10 BIS doesn't change my mind on this topic, and the Sims seem to consistently give higher number for spell power items such as your main hand than going for a physical one. And when it comes to cleave in AoE, it's not even a discussion anymore. I don't have a lot to add to this phase other than Raging Spirit damage done is our time to shine, baby. Keep mouse over flame shocking new mobs, swap to high health ones. If you over aggro, blame your tanks, hunters or rogues for failing to out-threat the scrawniest kid in the class and make them question their masculinity. Be toxic. Getting choked can be fun and exciting, but inside of the throne room is not the time and place to choke. Walk confidently in front of your assigned leader and cast chain heals like there's no tomorrow. Do not fall behind and act insecure. You need to be ahead of the group to be able to do any meaningful health per second to the rest of the raid. Just like I have no idea how to place my webcam to look my best on stream, I have no idea how you should place your camera inside of this fish tank to see properly. Just try and figure out what works for you. I'm a helicopter view enjoyer and it seems to work. Made it so far that your guild is consistently making it into the throne room, it's just a matter of time until you and your friends kill the boss. If you have deaths inside of the room, you'll likely fall behind on DPS and not make the enrage timer in tier 9 BIS, but don't stress it. Just come out and try to bounce Lich King around while you as an enhancement shaman plays Earthbind to help deal with vile spirits and try to keep hitting the boss best you can. Vile is less of an issue in this stage of the Lich King encounter. Don't pre-move excessively like in the Valkyr phase. Keep your uptime as high as possible and only move if you're getting targeted by Defile. The tank can easily drag Lich King away from the Defiles that are close by. So, people have been asking me about best in slot list for tier 10. At the moment, this is the highest performing sim that I've been managed to come across. I believe it was featured by Simonize and Jordy, two content creators in the RAF space. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you manage to sim higher on your own with some other trinket setup, fight length, or niche item, then go ahead. I'm gonna speak freely about some of the questions that I've gotten, and one of them comes here and says, do I have any doubts on enhancement being optimal for speedruns in ICC? And frankly, I don't have any doubts regarding this. I'm pretty sure that Enhancement Shaman will not be optimal in tier 10 speedrunning. I think that there's definitely comps out there in full tier 10 BIS that involves using a Blood Decay to pump up your Feral DPS and using Marksmanship Hunter who seems to be simming phenomenal and a Resto Shaman to drop the Strength Totem. I think Enhancement Shaman is gonna struggle to just by default keep their spot, and I'm not sure that it's always gonna be optimal. However, I think that both Death Knights and Hunters have really viable second specs. You can play Unholy, you could play Blood DPS, you could play Survival Hunter, and arguably perform even better than the specs that compete against Enhancement Shaman for a spot. Perhaps Enhancement Shaman doesn't have an optimal setup in mind when you slot it, but maybe the player in question is still your best choice. And a well-played Enhancement Shaman, in my opinion, will always be viable. Optimal? No. Viable? Yes. Another very common question in my stream and in my Discord is regarding BIS lists. And the Wowhead BIS list can be improved, and I flashed earlier on my screen the BIS list that I think currently is the BIS to go for. There might be cases where another set of trinkets will be better depending on fight length, etc. But I think the one that I'm linking and also down in the description of the video is gonna be super solid. Lastly, there's a question regarding Anfal. Is it possible to add a rotation guide like you did at the start of RAF in your first enhancement guide? And I didn't really have room in this video for adding it because I feel like it goes very in depth. And I would also like to do the rotation video with log support to explain why you should weave, why you shouldn't weave. Should you do a caster global? Should you do a physical global? What is the value of a storm strike here versus waiting and doing a shock instead? And just try to map out my thought process behind the different globals that I may be using. But I didn't have room, I didn't have time to put that into this video. So for all the people that were hoping for like an explanation why I do what I do, I'm sorry, I didn't have room. When making this video, we're about 12 hours away from tier 10 making it into the live servers, and I'll be in the roster and I'll try to compete for world first as an enhancement shaman. I'm pretty sure that many guilds have decided to bench their shaman for the race for world first tier 10, and I'm sure it crossed leadership's mind in progress as well. It doesn't have a secure spot. It's not 100% safe that you should bring an enhancement shaman this time around. But I'm sitting here and really hoping that I'll be able to show to myself and to my guild that I'm good enough to keep my spot in this race and for many races to come. And lastly, this didn't turn out to be an encompassing guide for all of the tier 10 encounters, and I didn't have quite the time to add all of the fun memes and stuff that I wanted to include. I hope to all the enhancement shamans and other people that just like the way I phrase my things, that you were entertained by this video, and you got to see some enhancement shaman gameplay on Lich King 25-man heroic, and maybe you took something away from it. I didn't spend any time talking about, oh, this is the file and this is infest. There's plenty of guides out there that can teach you how the basics of the fight goes. But I really think that if you're a melee player and more specifically an enhancement shaman, I think this video and just looking at the footage of Lich King 25 heroic, you can pick up on a lot of things. Some of the things I've talked about, but some of the things it's up for you to discover yourself. So thank you all so much for watching it this far, and I hope to see you whenever I go live over at Twitch. And I'm not sure when I'll be making my next YouTube video. Maybe if this video gets like really good reception and you guys appreciate the effort I put in, I'll make more videos. It's just that I've noticed that making high effort YouTube videos hasn't really paid off in the sense that it doesn't feel as accomplishing and as fun as engaging as streaming when I can talk to you guys directly and you can chat to me. When I'm making videos like this, it's more so I put out into the world what I hope you guys will enjoy, and maybe I get some YouTube comments to reaffirm that feeling. Anyway, I'll see you guys in my next stream, and until next time, I'm out.